all sorts of things have to be discussed. So I want to get back to the central practice point. And if we don't understand this, then there's no real check on that irritability, that harming. And I'm not saying this is something that happens overnight, but the core of the practice, see, that's what I want to talk about. Even though in a way it's a little bit technical, and though many of you know it, you can also know it without knowing it. And sometimes I don't want to know anything about it. It's not that the nature of the human condition is to avoid this. There's only one thing that's necessary in practice. Only one thing. And that is the open experience of what is usually the body without anything else interfering. Now what usually interferes is, of course, our self-centered thinking. See, a lot of people think they flash between what they're thinking and what they're experiencing, and that's valuable. It begins to loosen things up. But eventually, particularly after we've been sitting for a while, the ability to sit for a few seconds at first, maybe 3, 20 is a long time, to be able to sit and just be nothing but that sensation. See, that sounds simple. It's not so simple, because human beings don't want to do it. See, there's no you in that experiencing. See, if there's a shadow of a self-identification type thought in that, oh yeah, then nothing happens. No healing occurs. No transformation occurs. No check takes place on that ego-centered anger. And for some people this morning, I was just putting my finger on their leg and just saying, just feel this. There's nothing else in the universe but this. For say, as long as you can do it. 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. Just to surrender to that sensation. See, it seems like such a stupid thing to do. See, that is life, that sensation. That's all you are. It's that sensation. If it has a 1% mixture of self-centeredness, there's no transformation. I'm not saying you don't learn something. And for many years, all we can do is to sort of do it. See? But this group in particular is a more mature group than most session groups are. At least it's not quite as mixed. Unless you understand this, all the other fancy talk about practice can be just a waste of time. See, just to sit and what sensation are we talking about? Doesn't matter. As long as it's in the present moment. I'm not saying to fixate on the muscle. That's not what I'm talking about. Just an open allowing and just nothing in the world but that. Nothing. Which doesn't mean that thoughts may not float through, but no attachment to them. Now, as we begin this kind of practice, we might be able to do that for 2-3 seconds. Even 2 or 3 seconds changes your life. And the longer we sit over the years, the reason it's easier, of course, is we begin to at last lose some of our interest in this drama that unfolds out of our minds, this noise that we like to manufacture constantly. See, slowly our hope which means that we're generating that, our hope for ourselves, that something or someone or something's going to take care of us somehow. And so we think and we think and we think. As that begins to weaken our ability to just sit 20 seconds, a minute, with mature practice, almost indefinite. It doesn't mean the thoughts don't come up, kind of float through. But they don't distract this central, Jean Klein calls it state of not knowing, just allowing, just being. Simplest thing in the world, I think. And it's the basis of all transformation, all healing. And when it's firmly established, then life springs out of that, instead of out of our attempts in our little mind to figure everything out. Then we just naturally do, function, and it's never complete. Certainly not complete for me, but at least it's more complete than it used to be. That's all we can ever say. See, until it is fairly strong at least, we're not really living. We are potentially living, but we're not actually living. And who wants to die and think, I've never lived? And of course, if this is firmly established, then death is no problem. Which doesn't mean you have to like it. If we don't understand this, and at first, even though you listen to it, you may not understand it, but this core, if it's not fully understood, well, without it, there's nothing. All psychological attempts to understand ourselves or forgive ourselves or all this fancy jargon, particularly where we live, is just a waste of time. Why is it a waste of time? Because it doesn't work. See, all abuse, all complaint, all yelling at somebody else comes out of a space of insecurity and fear. Fear for this little self, see? Somebody's not going to think I'm wonderful enough, or I think I'm not wonderful enough. Or one of the numberless variations. As long as we operate out of this kind of thinking, we're very reactive, very quick to anger, very quick to put it out there. And frankly, without the slightest interest in what we're doing. Friendships get broken, marriages get broken, partnerships get broken, organizations function poorly. Children grow up with highly reactive parents. See, somewhere that chain has to be broken. Now, every time you can sit for, say, 10 seconds, that absolute stillness, which isn't an effort, it's an allowing, then it's like a knife that begins to cut through that wall we have around us. And that wall, of course, is not real because it's composed of our illusions. Nevertheless, it acts as a wall. Now, sometimes a certain amount of practice, sometimes circumstances, sometimes, well, it could be a lot of things, will cut through that wall for a second. And we have a glimpse of what a free life is. Some people call that enlightenment. Not really. See, only when the wall from years of just being in the space begins to get really porous, really transparent, then one day it shatters. Or at least mostly shatters. We don't want to get too carried away here. Now there's nothing we do when we sit that's wrong. It couldn't be wrong, because it is what is. But without this slow increase of being able to just be the sensation, because the sensation is what life is. If that doesn't take place, then our life remains potential, not actual. And who wants that? So I want to say again what it is. And people say, oh yeah, I'm experiencing my body. See, I doubt it. As human beings, we don't want to stay with this at all, see? The minute you become the sensation, totally surrender to it, you've disappeared. And the whole focus of our life isn't to disappear, but to glorify ourselves, to increase my sense that I'm important, I'm wonderful. Of course we're wonderful, but not in that sense. It's the last thing human beings want to do. But at least we can understand it, and we can be sure that that we understand in our sitting that, well, maybe this sitting period, maybe this, a few seconds at least, see? Not as a goal, but as a surrendering for a little bit to just what is. See, it's boring from the ordinary point of view. Couldn't be boring, though, if there weren't a faint thought twined around it. Boredom is thinking. See, without that self-centered thought, oh, I don't know, I want to do this. See? Without that, not boring, see. Since there's no you there, what is it? Can't say. There's not anything that we can talk about. And I'm only talking about it because some of you are ready to hear it, some of you aren't. But it has to get through at some point. See, this quick reactivity, which we all have, is lethal. See, we're so quick to fool with ideas like, yeah, I've got to put it all out there. I've got to have my rights. I'm not being treated fairly. Until we understand this down here, we don't know what to do about any of that. And I point to down here because, in a sense, as the body lets go of its self-centered notions, it relaxes into the hara. But don't try to do it. You can't try to do that. It's not something you try to do. Three seconds, 10 seconds, a minute, an hour, all day. Now, one reason, as a teacher, I work so much with people's thinking is if we're caught there, there's not going to be 1 second. It's not that the thinking's important. But we have to know it. We have to see how it dominates our lives. It dominates our ideas of relationships, of work. But always, if people are persistent, the power of this thinking factory begins to weaken. And one way to weaken it is to start your sitting, not in the first days, but now that you have, maybe a day to sit, start your sitting with just being here. And then, at some point, the buzz begins. Handle it as well as you can by being aware, noticing it, labeling it, whatever. At some point, if you persist in doing this for more than 10 minutes, I'd say pick it up like a pile of dirty laundry and just put it down. Not suppress it, just put it down. And then start over again. Try to have a few seconds. And there's something about even having the few seconds that makes the thoughts less obstreperous, less insistent, less real. It's like a interesting chicken and the egg type thing. And partly I'm going on like this because we return to a life of daily practice. If we don't understand this central point, we get lost. If we don't understand that all day long, while it will be less thorough, in some sense we keep track, eventually it's like a presence. And that presence, we sort of keep it with us all the time, not with thinking about it, but it begins to just be there. And sometimes we can just stop for a moment and just for a second feel something. It's all useful. If we don't have some clear-cut notion like that, the clarity and the whatever develops in session, it always does develop, just the nature of session will bring this up to a higher than ordinary degree of comprehension. If we don't have some idea, then it just sinks back in the mud. Who wants that? Anyway, I don't want to talk too much more, partly because I don't want to becloud the one thing I'm saying. Now we have one day left. If you have any questions, many of you know what I'm talking about. But see, all Dharma talks are saying the same thing. All I can do is to keep making the central points that somebody here is going to hear today. Maybe you didn't hear it a month ago, but maybe today you can hear it. And we keep, all of us, including myself, going ahead with this work. That's what our life is for. So we don't have a potential life, we have an actual life. And time is short. None of us knows how many more days we have. I'm not saying we get emotional about that. I'm just saying, let's not think we can do this. I'll do it next year after I get my degree. Or I'll do it next year after I get past all this or that or the other thing. Who knows what next year will be? We don't know. See, we're busy wrecking things because we don't have our priorities straight. Underneath all of our work in the phenomenal world is this. Out of space and time, but out of which all space and time flows. If we aren't attempting to work with that, then things get muddled up. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say, and no questions today.